check.
And my name is Chris Urkel. Welcome to our Lunch and Learn for digital annotation. I'm one of your facilitators, Chris Urkel, and I'll let Laura introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Laura Barnes. I'm a Southwestern Area Digital Learning Coordinator.
And we have Tanya with us as well.
Yeah, and I'm a digital learning coordinator for the South and Southeast areas, and I will be moderating the chat and dropping some links today.
And I'm also from the South and Southeastern areas. Well, welcome and thank you for joining. When joining the meet, please mute your microphone and choose to turn your camera on or off. And if you use the chat to introduce yourself, you can also use the chat to ask any questions. And remember to unmute your microphone when called upon by one of us or the chat moderator to ask your question. So we do have a resource we're going to be spending most of our time in today. That resource there will be something that you'll want to grab a hold of that link. We're going to paste in the chat the links to the slides, to the digital resource, and also to our feedback form. And because our Lunch and Learn is about a 30-minute session, we're going to kind of bounce around a little bit in this resource. So some of the resource information we don't go over, you're going to want to have access to that so you can go over that and refer back to it at your own time. And we'll also, again, remind you to fill out the feedback form at the end of the session, and our video is going to be previewable in a short period of time after this session is presented. And we also have a link to our website, the Digital Learning Coordinator website, where you can reach us for additional assistance. And this will be the feedback form that we'll use after the session's over. But let's go ahead and hop in. What we mean by digital annotation is that you're going to take some resources that you have, let's say, for example, a PDF that maybe your students would typically have printed out and handwrite into the piece of paper with pencil and paper. What we're going to be doing is taking some of those resources in a digital environment and still filling them out, but adding other things to them, which we'll call annotations. So our learning goals is to utilize the techniques and best practices that are used for digital annotation, and we're going to explore digital tools used for annotation, annotating digital materials and resources. And we have some ISTE standards listed there that you can refer to that link to our presentation. And we basically, what we're doing is we're taking resources that you have available. Laura's going to talk to you in a moment about copyright and public domain and fair use. But we're taking things that could possibly be in a Word document format, could be in an image format, could be in a PDF format, and we're going to be putting them into 7 resources that we're going to go over and then adding various types of annotations. That's the gist of what we're going to go over. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons of each of these resources. So Laura, you want to talk to us a little bit about adhering to copyright, public domain, and fair use guidelines?
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. Thank you. So what's really, really valuable about the space that we're in right now is we have access to so much material and so many resources in this digital space, but we want to be mindful of maintaining copyright and attribution when we're using and pulling materials. Much of the materials in CMAP and things like that have been fully vetted for copyright use, but not everything. So it is important as educators to really be sure we're looking at a critical lens when we're using materials. One example, we have the rights to distribute a lot of material to our immediate classroom as an educator under the education lens in copyright world, but we don't necessarily have the rights to distribute some of that material to an entire grade level or an entire school. So we really just want to be mindful if you're pulling things in CMAP and outside of CMAP, you just want to be mindful that you are within the copyright world and making sure that you're still attributing sources and making sure that you aren't infringing on copyright. And there's a lot of resources available to you from Wake County that I can drop in the chat in a little bit that would kind of help guide some of the lens as you're looking at resources critically. That can be really, really helpful. Some things in particular that I think Chris and I have ran into is when people have textbooks, for example, that are perhaps we had them in print a few years back, and we don't necessarily have them in print throughout the entire district. It would not be adhering to copyright to use some of those by scanning them in and distributing to a large group. So just keeping those in mind as you're moving forward.
Yes, thank you. And the ultimate goal to be able to accomplish what we're going to show you here in a few minutes is to get whatever the resource is into a JPEG format. And there's a video here on how to convert your PDFs. We have access to Adobe Acrobat Pro, and this short video in this book here will show you how to convert PDFs or even Word documents into JPEG images. We're going to save a little bit of time by not going over some of these digital annotation techniques and modes of expression. These are here for you to preview after the session at your own leisure. But these are some things we wanted to provide you. We just won't be covering them during this particular session to save time for what we're going to go over next, which are these 7 digital resources: Nearpod, Book Creator, Jamboard, Slides, Drawings, PowerPoint, and OneNote. And the reason why Adobe Acrobat DC is there on the left, that's what you would use to convert your PDFs into an image format. If you have a Word document, you would convert the Word document to a PDF and then PDF to a JPEG, and that's what that video on the previous page will show you. We're going to be looking at features of each of these resources. We're looking look at being able to annotate over an image. We're going to look to see if each of these features has collaboration, if they can insert text boxes, shapes, if you can crop, if you can lock the image, if there's drawing tools, if you have the ability to have multiple pages, and if you can add audio or video. So for each one, for example, this first one here, Nearpod, if we look at those features, we can see that we can annotate over an image. Actually, all of them have that capability. And what you can do with Nearpod is bring in an image or actually a PDF and annotate right over that. There's a screenshot on the right that shows you what you can do with that. There's no collaboration in Nearpod per se. There's no text boxes. Excuse me, there are text boxes. There are no shapes or icons is what I meant to say, and you can't crop the image. It does lock it in place, so as students are navigating through, they're not going to be moving the resource that you brought in. And there are some drawing tools you can see there on the screenshot that you can draw as well as type in text onto your resource. And you would want to use this on the fly. We're looking at the right-hand side here now, and you want to be able to add, if you just need text, drawings, and images, you don't need to save it. Students can't actually save their work in Nearpod. They'd have to take a screenshot to save it. Some of the other resources are probably going to be more useful if you want them to save it. And if you don't need a collaboration, you may want to use Nearpod for this. Some of the pros, this is a quick launch, and you can create this in advance. Students can see their work as well as you being able to pop in and see their work. You can import PDFs into Nearpod, and it locks the resource in place for you automatically. And some of the cons are that it's not collaborative, students can't save their work, and you can't add audio or video. And what we're going to do for the next few resources is go through the same kind of pattern. We're going to take a look at the features. We're going to take a look at when to use and the pros and cons. And I'll always kind of pause for a moment to see if anyone else wants to chime in or add anything. And also there's always a video on each of these pages that kind of gives you a quick demo. So before we go on, did you want to add anything, Laura, before we go to the next one?
No, I'm good. Keep it up.
Okay, so Book Creator, which is probably one of my favorite resources to use. It actually checks all the boxes except for collaboration. We're looking at the free version of Book Creator where you have 40 books as a classroom teacher, and you can annotate over the images that you bring in, text boxes, shapes, icons. You can crop your images that you bring in. So if you had some unwanted content on what you brought in, you can actually crop that out. You can lock it. You have a wide variety of drawing tools, multiple pages, of course, in a book, and of course you can add audio and video right in Book Creator. There's buttons for creating videos and audio, which is nice. You don't have to use another resource to create your audio and video and bring it in. There's a sample of a drawing that I did in Book Creator, and it has an actual, I call it AI, drawing tool. As you start to draw something, it'll give you options of what you're trying to draw and allow you to pop that in. So that's how some of those look really nice. So you want to use this when you have a culmination of a project. So unlike with what we just showed you with Nearpod, where it's kind of just like one page, this would be something that we'd want to do for maybe a whole unit. So we have multiple pages of digital annotation occurring. If you want to use multimedia, if you want students to be creative, if you don't necessarily need that collaboration, there is kind of a way to get students to be able to collaborate. But again, with the free version, it's not as easy as just hitting share. It's kind of something you have to go through several steps to do. Some of the pros is that it's very customizable. You can add audio and video right within Book Creator. You can do voice to text. You have the AI drawing tools. And the Noun project is part of Book Creator. Book Creator also just added some templates and themes that you can select as well, and the ability for it to be in other languages. That was just something that just recently was announced last week. Some of the cons is that with the free version, you only have 40 books, and that students need to make the book. So this isn't something you can create in advance for your students. They would have to create this on their own. So you'd have to provide them with the image to import, to annotate over, and they'd have to manually do that themselves. And one of my little pet peeves is that you can't select all and then move. You have to move each individual, for example, on the strong image in order to move that. So that's a look at Book Creator. Now Jamboard has some great functionalities. You can, of course, annotate over an image. It has the collaboration built into it. It's text boxes, shapes, and icons, has some drawing tools, and you can have, we call them frames, multiple pages or multiple frames. And you want to use this when you can do it with one page or more than one page. It's very user-friendly. Of course, it's collaborative, easy to use. It has that really wide canvas. So if you look at that screenshot, I brought in a PDF where students would generally just type in some responses. And in addition to just typing in the responses, they can do digital storytelling. They can add the sticky notes there. They can bring in images. They can draw. They can add a lot more to just the written responses that was originally on the resource. Teachers can create this in advance. You can force a copy. Some of the cons is that you can't bring in audio or video into a Jamboard. Now, moving files after they're created, in other words, if you create the Jamboard, you have to make a copy in order to save it to another location. So my workaround is open up a folder where you want the Jamboard to live and then hit create. Don't create and try to move afterwards. And then again, you need to duplicate it in order to move. So any questions or comments on Nearpod? I know Tanya has a link to a resource of some great templates. She may want to pop in the chat there.
So yeah, so there's no questions in the chat right now, and I will continue to add the links.
Sweet. Now Google Slides, probably the Swiss Army knife. It checks all the boxes. You can annotate over images, of course, collaborate. It's got text boxes, shapes, icons, cropping. When I say lock, I go into master view and set the resource or the image as the background in the master view, which in a sense locks it, and everything else is a layer over top of it. And of course, you have some drawing tools, which is the scribble, multiple pages, and you can add audio and video. Now, there's no like record button built in Slides. You'd have to record your audio outside of Google Slides and then add the audio. Same thing with the video. You have to add the video, but you can't have audio and video in your resource. So when students annotate, if you look at that screenshot, not only can they respond to the questions or the writing prompts there, but they could add, text annotations, drawings, images, audio, and video. So it's very versatile. You want to use this when it has a culminating project. You could use it for a one and done, but if you want to take advantage of multiple slides, maybe do something that culminates for a whole unit. If you want to use it for multimedia, you can do that. If you want students to be creative, the pros that I recognize is that it's customizable. You can create this in advance. You can force a copy. Of course, you have the audio, video, locking images, and a large canvas. You can even adjust the size of your canvas. And as far as cons, I'm kind of open to comments for that. I think the only one I can think of is it'd be nice if one day you can just hit record video right in slides, or hit record audio right in slides, as opposed to having to do that external and then bring it in. And drawings, kind of similar to slides in some aspects. Of course, there's a couple of differences. One thing we notice here is if you look at the boxes that are checked, as far as the locking, not being able to lock is one thing I noticed. And multiple pages, there's a workaround where if you have another drawing, you can leave a link in one drawing that links to another, and therefore you're creating the effect that there's multiple pages. But in reality, there's no way to create multiple pages in drawing. It's kind of a one page, but it does have the other features. Surprisingly, you can bring in audio and video into a drawing. And the way you would do that is you would have a Google Slide presentation open where you would bring the audio into a Google Slide, you bring in the video into a Google Slide, copy it in slides, and when you come over to your drawing, hit paste, and that's how you can paste in video and audio into a drawing. So there's kind of a workaround for that. And there's, of course, a little video for a demo and when to use. You would want to use this for culminating projects or products. If you desire to use multimedia, if you want students to be creative, some of the pros is that it's customizable. Create in advance, you can force a copy. Of course, you have the audio and video workaround through slides, and it has a large canvas that can be customized. And some of the cons, again, open for comments. The only ones I can think of is if you can hit just record video and audio right in the resource itself. That would be convenient versus having to bring it in through slides by copying. Now, PowerPoint, we have access to PowerPoint. PowerPoint is something that is very similar to slides. There's a few differences here. I didn't check locking as far as on the left, the features. Now, technically, you can set an image as a background, but what I found is that if I bring in, let's say, the resource that's here, and I try to make that the background, it came in super large. It was like zoomed in, and I couldn't shrink and resize the image. So I had to kind of let the image come in and float there, and then you put your text boxes on top of it. So technically, if a student grabbed the image, it would move. Now, if you do set something as a background and by coincidence it fits perfectly, that'd be great. But I experimented with a few things, and that's why I didn't check lock on PowerPoint. But everything else is there. And they actually have, if you look at shapes and icons, PowerPoint has an amazing library of icons and stickers. So if you want large access to a lot of images or stickers or icons, PowerPoint may be something you want to consider looking at because of their extensive library and their drawing tools. If you compare the drawing tools in PowerPoint to the scribble in Google Slides, there's a large difference there. So I would definitely look at the drawing tools in PowerPoint. And a lot of the same things are listed here as Google Slides as far as using it for culminating projects. Could be a one and done. Multimedia, you want students to be creative, you desire more space. And of course, the pros is it's customizable. You can create in advance. You have the audio. Now, adding video, it has to be a video that's online versus in slides. You can have a video that is in Drive and isn't like posted to the web. In slides, the video has to come from an online resource. So it has to be posted somewhere like Vimeo or YouTube. Locking images. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask, and this may be putting you on the spot, but is that the same for the desktop version of PowerPoint in addition to the Office 365 version of PowerPoint?
So because my perspective for this would be that students would be using it, I use the online version. So
That's good to know.
to test the desktop version, I'd have to check that. But
Okay,
I would
so just
assume
to clarify for with teachers at least, I do know that there might be some teachers that tend to use that desktop version. So to be sure to use that Office 365 because it allows for more equitable access with our students. Thank
yeah,
you.
sure. There's a similar situation with OneNote, which we'll get to in a minute with the videos, with the desktop versus the web version. Now, I did put lock images under pros. I mean, technically you can, but I had problems with the size of it. So, it can lock, it can maybe not fit right. And of course, the icons and stickers, if you haven't checked that out, I would definitely check that out. It's worth looking at. Cons, not able to easily force a copy. Maybe possible lack of experience with students being more used to Google Slides versus the whole Microsoft slide. That may not be true, but it's a possibility. And then online videos only is a con, and background images are large when you bring them in and try to make it lock. And then OneNote. So OneNote, you can annotate over an image, you can collaborate it, you can have text boxes. There's no shapes or icons like library within OneNote. Not to say that you can't bring them in, but as far as a library built into it, wasn't able to crop there, wasn't able to lock it. They do have some great drawing tools. So much like PowerPoint, if you haven't looked at PowerPoint specifically for drawing tools, OneNote I know is used by a lot of teachers because of the drawing tools, especially for math, and of course with the math formulas. So you might want to check that out. You can have multiple pages. I mean, you can have a whole entire notebook. That's the benefit of OneNote. And adding audio and video, I didn't check. So as Laura mentioned earlier, there is a difference between the desktop version and the online version. So as a teacher with a desktop version, you can bring in a video. And then if you create a notebook for students on a desktop version that has a video and then provide it to students that are accessing it on a browser, they can still see the video, but you can't bring in videos directly and embed them on the online web-based version of OneNote. They have to be the desktop version. You can have links and URLs, but not embedding. And then, of course, there's a demo video and a screenshot. The Canvas area is huge. I mean, there's plenty of space there to work with. Using it for culminating projects, or maybe, I wouldn't say just a one and done because it is an entire notebook. You may want to take advantage of it being a notebook with different tabs. If you want to incorporate collaboration, if you want students to be creative, if you desire more space, it's got a ton of space. Again, it's customizable. Check out the math formulas if you're interested in using it for math. Adding stickers. There are some stickers, which is a little bit different than when I said shapes and icons. And adding audio, large work area, notebook organization, and some cons. Forcing a copy was something that took a couple of steps. For me personally, there may be a way that I'm unaware of that's easier, but it was a little bit of a couple of steps for me to do that. Laura may have a different perspective or be able to offer an easier way to do that. Maybe possible lack of experience. Maybe students haven't used OneNote, so maybe there'll be a little bit of a learning curve before they were to use the resource. And of course, videos being linked only in the web-based version.
Yeah,
Now that
specifically.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay, just to speak specifically to OneNote. So as far as I fully agree. I think the lack of experience, it's such a different platform than a lot of the other things that we're using right now. But I think it's hugely beneficial when you're thinking about annotation and math. I think it's huge. I think the big difference that, like you mentioned, Chris, the forced copy, the big difference you're going to see in OneNote versus Class Notebook. So if you have Class Notebook, when you assign out to multiple students, you can duplicate the pages and assign, make it basically a forced copy where each child receives a version of the page that you want them to work on. But in OneNote, that wouldn't necessarily be the case.
Okay, yeah, I don't have much experience with ClassNote, so thank you for, am I saying that right, ClassNote?
Yes, class notebooks. So
Okay.
it's essentially the exact same tool. It is a different, it's slightly different verbiage when you go to Office 365. I use Class Notebook and OneNote, but I do have to go into my all apps in Office 365, and then Class Notebook pops up. It's literally just OneNote, but it's Class Notebook, and so you're able to assign it to multiple students. It's not an LMS, but it's a little more similar to an LMS than it would be like a Google Doc, if that makes sense, because students are kind of given their own sections and assignments and things like that. So that's kind of the big difference, but it's all the exact same tools that OneNote has that Chris discussed. And then again, the same goes for, you don't want to be using the desktop version. You do want to make sure you're using that Office 365 online version.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We're going to check our chat and see if there's any questions or comments at the moment before we wrap up our session here.
No questions or comments. Laura has posted direct links to some copyright and fair use resources, and the slide deck also provides those resources as well. So those are in the chat available, but there are no questions or other comments.
So to wrap it up, we want to remind you to please provide us some feedback. There's always something we want to look for, ways we can improve our presentations. And the resource that I provide you has a little bit more information than was covered. We did that to save time. So if you want to look at some of the other information that's in this resource we provide you a link to, you may want to peruse that. Really, if you look at the big picture, we're talking about students being creative and students creating something that goes beyond just responding to a question and giving them the ability to add other types of annotation, whether that be a drawing, an image, a sticker, a video recording, an audio recording. It's going to build upon and add more than just the response they would to have given originally to that resource that you've brought in and digitized and have brought into one of these resources. So that's the gist of it. The digital learning coordinators are always available to support you in a wide variety of ways. We have area digital learning coordinators on our website, dlc.wcpss.net. You can find your local area digital learning coordinator, and if you want support with any of the resources that was presented here today, they'd be able to help you with that, as well as an abundance of other ways they can offer you support. We do have lunch and learns on a regular basis. We have our podcast, and we have some other resources on our website you may want to check out, including our newsletter. So with that, those are my closing comments. Anyone else want to add some comments before we wrap up today's session?
This was great. Thank you, Chris.